Hello everyone, excited to be able to share with you today the ultimate retirement plan for folks that have over $2 million of liquid net worth. And today we're going to dive into a lot of different details, not just the impact of different lifestyle decisions that we might have, but then also be able to share some withdrawal strategies that marries up well with a tax strategy included. And then we're also going to be able to dive in a little bit deeper in regards to estate-specific plan here for Minnesota. And then lastly, we'll be able to touch on the investment side as well. Excited to be able to share a number of different ideas and arm you with a couple nuggets there. But this is not specific to you. This is not a specific recommendation for you and your family. This is purely just to arm you, educate you, and teach you. And if you did want some help implementing some of these strategies, feel free to reach out to us either on the Petros Family Wealth side or on the Petros Family Tax side. As we get into some of the nuance. So excited to be able to share this with you. Let's go ahead and dive in. As we dive in, I wanted to be able to share kind of a baseline of information here regarding this John and Jane pre-retiree. They were both age 60 and tentatively wanted to shoot for that age 65, but open to possibly retiring a little bit earlier depending on their comfort level in regards to the level of wealth that they might have in retirement. They're shooting for receiving $148,000 per year after tax and adjusted for inflation. And like many clients, they weren't aware, or they didn't have in the back of their mind how much they would want to have in retirement. So I'll show you that in a little bit about how we can come up to with kind of a baseline of lifestyle that they might want to achieve, and then add in some typical retiree expectations in retirement. And factor in those based on the experience of all our other clients, and just to prepare them for an enjoyable retirement. Currently, they're sitting at about $2 million of liquid net worth, but they also have about $500,000 of equity in their home. To start off with, they have a brokerage account that originally started with some inheritance from their grandparents back in the day from sale of their homes, and then they've been slowly contributing to over time. And so they're up to about $425,000 in a joint brokerage taxable account. And then Jane has a traditional 401k that she's investing in at her current job. And then Jane also has a traditional IRA worth about $375,000 coming from a previous employer, and then also a Roth IRA that she started contributing to, or a Roth 401k she contributed to at the old employer as well, and that's $200,000. John's been with this company a little bit longer, or more consistently there, so he's up to about $750,000 and primarily been invested in traditional 401k or pre-tax 401k. Their home is worth about $750,000 with a $250,000 mortgage, nice interest rate that they got during 2021. Currently both working, receiving $135,000 a year of income. And then tentatively for now, we're assuming Social Security at age 70 in order to maximize or let that Social Security increase over time. But we'll play around with that too. I'll show you a couple strategies in that front too, and some of the impacts. Currently, Jane is contributing to her Roth 401k of 12% of her salary, and then her employer is contributing 3% into a pre-tax 401k bucket. John, on the other hand, is contributing 10% into a traditional or pre-tax 401k, and then his employer also contributes 3% into that pre-tax bucket as well. Then they also have been contributing to their joint brokerage account on a regular basis of $1,000 per month, so $12,000 per year. So now that we've developed a baseline of information, what we want to do is we want to take a look at how they might sit if they just keep doing what they're doing. And clearly here in their long-term projection, just kind of using the average returns over time, which for this is about 7%, they're sitting pretty well. And so their wealth will continue to build here as they line up for retirement. And then you can see that as they're drawing from retirement and delaying that Social Security, their wealth would actually be anticipated to drop. Then once that Social Security kicks in, the strain of the withdrawals on the portfolio is rather minimal, and therefore their investments are projected to increase over time. So a couple things based on this client, and like many others, John is pretty cautious about the stability of Social Security. And here at Petros, from our perspective, we typically advise folks that are over the age of 60 not to assume any major changes to Social Security as they head into retirement. However, for anybody under the age of 60, we do consider some discounts, and then for folks under the age of 40, we typically don't include it at all. And that's just a protection measure based on the anticipated drop, and that's just based on the healthiness or unhealthiness of the Social Security system, likely would impact some of the younger folks rather than some of the older folks. The other thing is they wanted to explore the possibility of retiring at age 63. And then one thing that we always like to add, others may not always fully understand until they are retired, is that a lot of times in that initial couple years of retirement, that's usually when you're youngest and healthiest, and you want to try to maximize your life and the resources that you built up over the years. And so that's sometimes called the retirement smile, where essentially when you start off in retirement, younger and healthier, you're doing all the travels, doing all the events that you wish you could have done when you were younger and maybe didn't have as much money. But then as you get a little bit older, the expenses tend to come down with less travel, being able to stay home a little bit more. But then it eventually ramps back up as far as the medical expenses. And so in order to factor that in, especially that maximizing that life here right after retirement, we want to also factor in an additional $15,000 budget that they may not have really thought about before, but maybe it will have the option to incorporate. So first, let's just take a look at some of the impacts of these different triggers and to see what these small tweaks might do to a client's portfolio. So if we were to go from Social Security at age 70 and bring that down to age 65, as far as a projection goes, it's anticipated that the amount of wealth would actually increase. And the reason for that is when somebody initially retires, the draw from their portfolio it doesn't create as much stress on the portfolio, and it's allowed to compound over time. The Social Security, the more that you wait, it does compound, but it compounds at an 8% simple interest rate based on your full retirement age. Whereas the markets compound on an annualized basis. And so, for example, if you have $10,000 of Social Security income, to make some of the math a little bit easier, if you wait one more year after your full retirement age, that $10,000 will go up to $10,800 the next year. Then in the second year that you wait, it'll increase to $11,600, increasing by that $800 or that 8% simple interest based on that full retirement age benefit that you have. You're also going to have some cost of living increases as well, but generally that 8% is what some of the reason when you plug in taking Social Security a little bit earlier, that it's projected that the overall wealth over the course of your life is going to be higher, because even if you have the same or even lower interest rate, which is what we had projected for this client, at 7%, that 7% is compounding. So $10,000 that you didn't have to take out of the portfolio, reinvested, the next year might be $10,700. But then the growth on top of that $10,700 is going to be more than the initial increase of that $700 based on the compounding factor. And so a lot of tools are going to factor that in, and over a longer period of time can potentially show the impact of that increase in wealth over time. Now, one thing we want to consider also around Social Security is the stock market and investments, they don't go up in a straight line at all. And so even though as far as a projection of linear growth in the portfolio, we also want to factor in the volatility of the markets. One of the tools that we use is what's called a Monte Carlo simulation. A Monte Carlo simulation takes your rate of return and expected volatility and runs it through 1,000 different market scenarios every single year. When you run it through that 1,000 scenarios, it mimics the volatility or shows us how many times of those 1,000 scenarios were you able to achieve everything you wanted to achieve. And so with taking Social Security earlier, we have a probability of success of 77%. Now, it's not like a grade in school. So when we stress test Monte Carlo simulations, many advisors tend to lean towards getting about a 70% rate of success or more. To folks that are in school or teachers, they might say, hey, that's only a C. And so that's not what we're talking about here today. Basically, if you have achieved a 70% probability of success, that basically means you have a 30% chance that you might have to adjust your lifestyle at some point over the course of your retirement. So it's not, we don't want to achieve those 80-90% necessarily, because if we do that, then we're likely not enjoying or utilizing the wealth that you built to its fullest potential, either for yourself, for your family, or some of the charities or or people that you care about. So if we take Social Security a little bit earlier at 65, we have a probability of success of 77%. If we were to go back to Social Security at age 70, you'll see that the probability of success is 81. And the reason for that is we're assuming that the Social Security is a more stable form of income. And yes, although you have the potential for not having as much wealth over time, it does eliminate some of those lower probabilities or eliminate some of the scenarios where the market tanks. And because you have the stability of Social Security, it reduces the amount of stress on the portfolio over a longer period of time. So that could be considered a risk mitigation factor as well, if you feel confident in the overall Social Security system at that age. All right, now I know that was a lot on Social Security, but wanted to show the impacts, both the potential positives with the potential for their wealth increasing, as well as the possibility of downside by increasing the strain on the portfolio with that lower Social Security benefit. Let's take a look at retirement at age 63. And so let's start off again with the lifetime portfolio value. And you can see, because we're retiring a little bit earlier, it does make a pretty big impact. And it's really two reasons. One is we are not contributing in those last 2 years between age 63 and 65. And we're not allowing the investments to fully compound during that time as well. And with those two factors, the 2 years may make a pretty sizable difference in a client's life. However, for these particular clients, they are very open to retiring earlier because the impact really isn't really shown until a client's in their 80s as far as that overall wealth picture. So for example, somebody might look at this and say at age 90, will it really make a big difference to them to have 2.2 million versus 3.9 million? It may or may not. And so is that extra 2 years of their life back in retirement, is that worth it to them? And ultimately that's going to be a decision between you and your spouse as you're looking at retirement. I also wanted to be able to factor in the retirement smile. So whenever we do retire, especially again when we're retiring earlier, typically we want to maximize that life and be able to spend more, travel more, do more things. And so when we looked at this possibility, they decided that was a little bit too much of a hit as far as their overall net worth. They felt more confident that they would rather retire at 63 and then skip on some of the additional expenses or additional trips that they could have made in retirement. So I'm going to unclick that here. So after reviewing whether to retire at age 63 and not having the $15,000 a year additional in retirement to fully maximize while they're younger than healthier, what they decided to do was to skip on the idea of retiring at age 63 and instead maintain their retirement at age 65. And since we are a couple of years away from retirement, we'll keep monitoring the Social Security situation and determine at a later time whether or not to shoot for that age 65 or age 70. So with that additional expenses in retirement in order to fully live their life, they're sitting still in a really good spot, and with that probability of success of 76%. Now we're going to take a look at the withdrawal strategies for this particular client and how it marries up with their tax strategy as well. What we have here is the long-term tax projection of meeting their retirement overall goals while also taking a look at which tax bracket they might be in different years of their retirement. So if we start off while they're working, you can see they're in the 24% tax bracket, which is represented by the blue line. The 22% or the start of the 22% tax bracket is represented by the orange line. And then the green line is the start of the 12% bracket. So anything between that green and that orange is in that 12% federal tax bracket. As you can see here, and this is quite often where we see a couple of years while we're delaying Social Security where we really have the ability to control client's tax situation, for better or worse. And our philosophy of both at Petros Family Wealth as well as Petros Family Tax is that we want to try to minimize the amount of taxes over the longest period of time. Typically what we see for retirees is that taxes can be either the third, second, or even the largest expense that they have. And so mitigating those over that longer period of time should provide a lot more comfort and increase the client's overall wealth, either to use for themselves or for their children or for the charities that they want to support. So as we look at the projected withdrawals, so we see these gap years. And so one idea, if we want to think about it, is if they're currently in the 24% tax bracket, and then potentially 0 or in up to the 22% bracket, or starting to add some income in the 22% bracket, what we want to do is want to try to reduce the taxes while we're in the 24% tax bracket and increase the taxes when we're in the 0 up to the 12, possibly up to the 22%. And so let's play around with a couple of different strategies on how we can try to even out the overall tax situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the Jane's 401k contributions from Roth over to traditional, and then we're also going to fill up the 12% tax bracket as we're in retirement from distributing from the traditional 401ks or the traditional IRAs. As you can see, a couple of different impacts here. So one is I want to start with transitioning from a Roth 401k contribution over to a traditional 401k contribution in these last few years of retirement. One way to think about it is just to isolate the last year of their retirement at age 65, and so let's say 2029. Now, if they have the choice between putting $100 into a Roth 401k or $100 into a traditional 401k, in that year of 2029, they contribute, let's say, to a traditional 401k, and they are at the 24% tax bracket. They put in that $100, and they get $24 back on their tax return. Now, if in the next year, so if you put that $100 in December, and then in January, you take that $100 out in the 12% tax bracket, you effectively made about a 12% return with that $100 in that 1 year. And projecting that over time, what we can see is the cumulative taxes in today's value will be $86,500 less in taxes over the long period of time. The other thing that you'll see is that it's $241,000 increase in today's dollars. If we look at what the future value would be, cumulatively over $200,000 of tax savings and an increase in overall portfolio value of $558,000. And that's the benefit of the advice, irrespective of investments, that can come from that advanced withdrawal strategy. Now I want to go back to this lifetime portfolio value with the adding the additional expenses, but then adding in the tax strategy and the withdrawal strategy over time. You can see that even with the increased retirement expenses, they're projected in their late 90s to have more wealth that they can transition to their kids. Now this is where we get into some of the estate planning involved, particularly for Minnesota. So I want to point out a couple things. Start with, for Minnesota, for those who are not familiar, Minnesota has a $3 million estate tax limit before an estate tax starts to come in. And so Minnesota has what's called essentially a death tax, not a gift tax. And so for Minnesota, if you have over $3 million of wealth, let's say $3,100,000, when you both pass, that extra $100,000 will be taxed at approximately anywhere between 12 and 16%. But just to make the math a little bit easier, it ends up being around $15,000, not including any attorney fees associated with mitigating and settling estates. When we look at a client's portfolio like this is just the liquid net worth, not including some of the real estate assets that they have. And so what I want to point out is, maybe in that age 70 as an example, so 2035, let's take a look at their overall balance sheet or their overall estate to help determine what kind of estate strategy they should be able to implement, or they should implement, in order to preserve the wealth that they built for their children. So based on these projections here, their overall balance sheet will be about $3.5 million. And you can see that between John's assets, joint account assets, and Jane's assets, so it'll be about $3.5 million, with John having about $1.5 million of assets, Jane at $850,000 approximately, and the joint assets, that joint brokerage, as well as the real estate of $1.1 million. If you break it out by the different tax type or the asset type, we can see that the real estate has grown to about $964,000, and qualified retirement, being in that traditional 401k, traditional IRA assets, of that $2 million. And then the Roths being around $385,000. Now, one of the tools that you can use for Minnesota is to try to preserve each spouse's $3 million estate tax exemption. And what you do is you do that by incorporating in a revocable trust with either a Q-tip or and not the ones that you use to clean out your ears, it's QTIP, or a marital trust or a family trust. So let me transition there to explore how you can mitigate some of the estate taxes before you transition your wealth to your children. Now, what I wanted to transition to is an educational tool that we use to show the impact of maintaining a revocable trust with a marital trust option. And so what I'm showing you here is a married couple with an estate of $5.8 million, with the husband having around $3.75 million, their home owned jointly at $400,000, and the wife owning assets of $1.65 million. If the client were to incorporate a will or a revocable trust without the disclaimer trust or marital trust or Q-tip, then what would happen is at the husband's passing, the assets would transition to the wife's name. And then when the wife passes away, again, anything over that $3 million will be subject to Minnesota estate taxes. And so we estimate that $2.8 million over the Minnesota estate tax, we can estimate around $420,000 in Minnesota estate tax before it transitions to their children. So how do we mitigate that? In this next slide, this shows the impact of having that marital trust or that disclaimer trust or that Q-tip, where at the husband's passing, $3 million of that wealth would be transitioned to a marital trust. And the difference between that $3 million and the $3.75 million would transition to the wife. She chooses to maintain that in her own estate. And what happens is during the spouse's and the wife's lifetime, she would receive dividends and interest from that marital trust. And she can have access to principal if she ever needs as well. But typically, because that bucket is estate tax free, we would want to try to draw from her other assets in her name first, so that way her 2.8 doesn't grow beyond that 3 million, and then also be subject to Minnesota estate taxes as well. And so in this case, we can transition when she passes. The marital trust would distribute just as it normally would to the children, but because we preserved the husband's $3 million, the children would be able to receive that wealth estate tax free. Now that we discussed the lifestyle changes, the retirement ages, Social Security, we also discussed the estate tax and different ways to mitigate those taxes so that you can transition more of your wealth to your children or to friends or family that care about. We also wanted to touch on the investment side. And so one of the things that Petros Family Wealth incorporates that maybe some other advisors don't necessarily incorporate is an investment style called structured notes. And we have a whole playlist available to clients and to folks like yourself that are interested in a little bit deeper dive into the investments. But I did want to bring this up, particularly for retirees that are looking more for some higher cash flows as we're heading into a lower yielding environment with interest rates coming down. And so I wanted to share with you a hypothetical of a structured income note. And this would be something that would be incorporated for a retiree if they're comfortable with the complexity and the uniqueness of this type of investment. What we would do is we'd incorporate a yield note for a portion of their fixed income allocation. Let's say a client has 60% stocks and 40% bonds as they head into retirement, potentially up to 10% allocation of yield notes, and then reducing your traditional fixed income to 30%. And so still maintain that 60% equity position, 10% in yield notes, and then the remainder in traditional fixed income and money market. The reason we do this is that it does add some additional yield to the portfolio while having some downside protection. And so in this hypothetical, this will be based off of the S&P 500, Russell 2000, which is a small cap index, and then the Dow Jones. Potentially investment up to 4 years, with a possibility of getting called or getting the money back early as soon as 6 months. This type of example also has about 20% soft protection, or what's called a barrier protection. And the reason we call it a soft protection is if at the end of the term, one of those indices is down more than 20%, well then the client would be down 1-for-1 on the principal from the underlying investment. However, if at the end of the term the lesser performer is down 20% or less, well, the client gets all their principal back plus whatever coupons they've earned over the course of that period. And again, this hypothetical pays about 8.6% so long as the underlying investments is not down more than 20% from the initial purchase date. Now, what I wanted to do is show a hypothetical of a very rough market, and that would be 2022, showing how some of these might interact with a down market. And so let's say, for example, this would be purchased towards the end of 2021 as we're riding the wave and the stimulus that was received during 2021. It wasn't the best opportune time to purchase either stocks or bonds. And as the Federal Reserve started to increase interest rate at the fastest in U.S. history, both stocks and bonds are negative during that 2022 period. And so how something like this interacts with that negative returns is that you can see different coupons being paid each quarter so long as the underlying investments is not down more than 20%. But then if the market is down more than that 20%, that coupon is missed and then restarted whenever the underlying investment is back up to more than negative 20. And as you can see over time, although it wasn't a great environment where we received the full 8.6% return, it could be an additional cash flow that you receive and still a positive return during a rough period in a client's retirement plan. And so adding a sliver of alternative investments to a client's portfolio can help ride the waves of both down equity markets and down bond markets by that additional cash flow that they need in order to maintain their retirement goals. So that was a long one, and hopefully very fruitful to share a number of different ideas, different strategies, and hopefully you took a couple nuggets away of information that you might be able to implement or to think about and talk with your spouse. And if you do want some ideas how we can incorporate a full strategy for yourself or your family, either on the Petros Family Wealth side or on the tax preparation and tax planning side with Petros Family Tax, happy to be of service to you and your family, but appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thank you so much.